Well, it is the top of the hour, and I would like to, one, say welcome. My name is Tiffany Turner Allen. I am the executive director here at nonprofit Prince George's County, and I wanted to welcome all of you who are joining us for this amazing conversation that we're going to be having with Senator Alsobrooks staff. So, let me just kind of give you a little bit of context. The purpose of really having this conversation is that we recognize here at nonprofit Prince George's County, we have over 250 nonprofit organizations as members, and we have conversations with so many different organizations that have been ongoing. And we know that we have been in this place of flux, right, in the country, under new leadership. And as we're navigating these very challenging times, it's been amazing to be able to get input from different people in leadership at different places, whether it's locally at the state level. But this conversation is uniquely different because we have our former county executive and current U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks, her office, we've been working very closely with them, and they have been amazing at providing us with updates in real time and attending past events. And so we talked about really providing a legislative update and briefing from a very high level for our nonprofit community and for others as well to understand what was happening, what was taking place throughout the country, and how it was affecting us at a local level, and to look at some opportunities in terms of how this impacts our organizations and what we can do about the many different things that we're hearing about in the news. So with that, I want to just say thank you to Senator Angela Also Brooks and her office. And I wanted to take a moment to introduce her amazing team that I know is working tirelessly. I mean, literally, right? And so we have joined with us today David Sloan, who happens to be the state director. We also have joined with us Jordan Hines, who is the deputy state director. And also we have Elizabeth Marbury, who is the legislative director for Senator Alsobrooks. And so I would like for you all to share a little bit more, introduce yourselves, but then also share specifically the role that you all play and what your position does in the context of working with a U.S. Senator's office. So I want to pass it to you, David.
Tiffany, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to kind of kick it to Jordan and Elizabeth, and then I'll give some remarks on behalf of the senator. But I am the senator's state director. And if you know kind of the structure of, congressional members, each congressional member has a district, or if you're a U.S. senator, a state office, and they have operations in Washington, D.C. And so I'm blessed and have the privilege of being the state director, where we have a apparatus that supports five regional kind of breakouts within the state, each having its own director and coordinator, its own office eventually, and also the Department of Constituent Services and Congressionally Directed Spending, which we work in tandem with our DC counterparts in that work. To kind of facilitate the senator's actual visibility in the state, but also the management of relationships and coordination with allies and partners, no more important than the nonprofit leaders that do work with their organizations on the ground for folks in the community that need service the most. So that's kind of the big picture of the state office. And I'll kick it to Jordan, who's the deputy state director, and then to Elizabeth.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jordan Hines, as David's already shared. I'm David's Deputy State Director, as well as the Senator's Deputy State Director. But more so, similar to David Sloan's point, we have regional directors that represent different parts of the state. While I'm labeled as Deputy State, I also handle our Prince George's and Southern Maryland region of the state of Maryland. So whenever, for any reason, Tiffany knows best. If she's unable to get a hold of anybody else on our team, I'm right there. Just we're playing teamwork and doing what we can. I've also been running point with the office. As you know, this is our senator's first year, so working with all the CDS processes for all the nonprofits throughout the state, along with our other team members from Jessica Cook and so many others. So That's what I'm here to hear and happy to serve.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Hi there. I apologize for being off video. I've got limited bandwidth and I want to make sure that I can hear all of you and you can hear me. I am Senator Alsobrooks Legislative Director. So I work out of the DC office and manage our legislative team. So our legislative assistants, our legislative correspondents that track our work and prepare materials for our participation in the Help Committee, the Banking Committee, the Aging Committee, and the Environment and Public Works Committee. I also track all of the action on the Senate floor and work with the senator on her voting decisions. So looking forward to chatting with you all today. I guess the last thing I'll add is that I worked at a nonprofit for 3 years in between my 3 tours of duty on the Hill. I've been on Capitol Hill for 12 years. This is my third senator, and I really am so enjoying working with Senator Alsobrooks and, of course, on behalf of the people of Maryland.
Thank you.
So for the senator, she would want us to say a few things on her behalf, so I will take through that respectfully. But really, like, it kind of starts where we began here. Tiffany, thank you for the work that you all do at Nonprofit Prince George's, and for everyone who made time to be here on Juneteenth. Like, you're here because you know how important it is for us just to talk and to be able to kind of share information. Um, the community of nonprofits are such a critical part of our society. You all lift up, society as a whole across an entire spectrum of American life. And you don't have to be reminded about the lifeline that you are. Literally, when people talk about nobody being left behind, it's the work that they're trying to do as leaders through nonprofits, whether it's Prince George's, whether it's Maryland, across the country. If we don't have nonprofit work, we're not getting to the people who are most vulnerable. And the senator kind of shares that value. Those values, and those have been her values since she was state's attorney. Um, and when we're in DC, or when she's here, she's always trying to look for time to spend time with nonprofit leaders, or to kind of see, well, like, how work is transpiring on the ground. Like, her heart is really with you all. And even though we're in the minority and the context is really, really violently unpredictable, right? There's the principle that we have to make sure that we're at least communicating with our allies about what we know today and what we will learn tomorrow, because things are changing, and this chaos, as you all know, is by design. It's by design. um and so, like, the current administration, like, it's determined to cut federal programming that supports so many of your projects. Like, if we're talking federal funding freezes, stop work orders, unclear guidelines around regulation, they're all designed to kind of take apart the progress that we've all made in building these alliances, right? It's all on purpose, and it feels chaotic, but it's very focused on, like, the work that everyone has done to date, right, through these partnerships. So we understand what we're dealing with, and I know that you do too. And it feels like we are getting into a rhythm, into the reaction of what we've seen over the last 6 months. But now it also feels like we're starting to become proactive as a community that's under siege. And so we got to continue to proactively try and push back, also reserve resources to do the work on the ground that we can, while an administration is really trying to withhold resources and funding. But to in a very smart, strategic way, try to continue to serve and educate the public and the folks that you serve, while trying to fight, on the government side, to protect and restore what's being taken or what's under siege. So finally, I'll just say, like, these kinds of discussions, as I said at the beginning, are important. We need to continue to, like, present opportunities for folks to stay informed, but also stay encouraged. You got into nonprofit work because many of you wanted to change the world through your own individual neighborhood or community. Like, that doesn't change. That hasn't changed. And the need for us to continue working towards those goals will not change. So on behalf of the senator, we want to continue all to just track with your entire Maryland delegation, not just us, but we will continue to make ourselves available to you all through, the forums that Tiffany and her team works to bring together. We're also available to come to your nonprofits directly to kind of observe and bring the senator when she can out to celebrate the work that you're doing even in this climate. So thank you, Tiffany, for that, for the opportunity for us to be here. And now we'll kind of just, I'll give it back to you and we'll talk through
No,
some issues.
thank you. Thank you
Mhm.
so much, David. Thank you for kind of that segue. It's a perfect segue as we kind of get started into the bulk of our questions, right? So there are so many questions that we have, and I know that I've heard you all, several of you have mentioned the CDS process, right? And so I know on the nonprofit end, I mean, we've heard it as CDS, we've heard it as CPF. They were formerly called earmarks. I know we are in acronym land, and so for us, when we talk about the CPF funds, we've talked about the community project funding, right? And so I know that we've also heard it as CDS in terms of congressionally directed spending. And can you kind of talk a little bit about whether those funds or opportunities are going to be available in the coming year and what nonprofits should be doing now to apply, for the application process? And if there's been any type of specific shift that you see or you all are hearing, um, or understanding if there are any particular types of issues that you think that there will get more CPF funding or support under the current Congress.
So I will kick it to Jordan, but I want to give Jordan the context here for everyone to work within, which is like we know we're in a situation where the applications from last year like were rescinded or were held up because we're working under a continuing resolution, and so pending like a budget being passed, like we'll be in the situation again, even with the applications from the latest fiscal year. So what we want people to understand is, regular order is important for the funds to flow through that process to make its way through the CDS process to um to organizations. And the senator and the Maryland delegation, like they're doing their part to responsibly negotiate in the budget process. But Jordan, I'll let you go through the nuts and bolts of process on CDS.
Sure. So, a lot of folks that are on this webinar, and Tiffany, you and I have worked and step with this. So, to start with your first comment, CPF, that's a community project funding, and that's a House term. CDS is congressionally directed spending, and that's the Senate term. So, for those who don't know, the House side is limited, probably about 15 requests per offices, while the Senate side, we have a little bit more leeway, and I will lean on Elizabeth to jump in at any time, so I'm not speaking too fully out of turn. But and with our first year, we've been working hand in step with Chris Van Hollen's office on that. And so anyone that is looking to apply again next year, I would say follow the same process that you've been doing this year. One of the things that I loved coming in beginning of the year is working with Deborah Haney from Chris Van Hollen's office, is meeting with a lot of the individuals. So individuals, I should say, by CEOs and executive directors from various nonprofits that will give us a full breakdown about why they're applying. And that plays a very significant role after you've applied. We in our office now have a real in-depth understanding about why you're seeking the funding that you're seeking. So to answer your question very specifically without getting too far in the weeds about the appropriation side, and I'll lean on Elizabeth for that, is continue following the process for how we went this year. And please make sure you follow up with reaching out to either myself. I know we have a designee in the legislative team on the Hill side, or within Chris Van Hollen's office as well, because we were working hand in step with that. But keep in mind the difference, Tiffany, again, to your point, community public funding is for the House side and CDS is for the Senate side.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just add, I am by nature an optimist, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't echo what David said in the beginning, which is that it's highly likely, given the state of the government and the fact that this particular administration isn't following the law, for lack of a better way to describe it. That includes appropriations laws. And so I think it's highly likely we're going to end up going into fiscal year 26 in the same place we were in with fiscal year 25. That presumably means a continuing resolution if we can pass it. Senator Alsobrooks voted against the last one largely because of these issues with the administration not following the law. But if we can pass another appropriations bill for fiscal 26, if I had to bet, I would bet we're probably going to be in that continuing resolution space. So we are going to prepare and work with all of your organizations and many others as if there are going to be congressionally directed spending, and if there's bills that move and those contain congressionally directed spending, we're going to make sure that our Maryland priorities are carried. I just am not sure. I don't want to give false hope that those bills will ultimately be signed into law.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. We'd rather know exactly what we're up against. And again, David has provided this layout and the landscape to let us know that it changes from moment to moment. So we really appreciate that. As we're talking about funding and opportunities, and as you all have eloquently put it, the nonprofits are the backbone of our society. I mean, our nonprofit organizations have been working tirelessly to, in whatever area that they do their work, to really continue to move forward the needle for change, as well as to provide services and support to the communities that they serve. We have seen that there is a lot of inequity right now in terms of federal funding opportunities. So what's happening right now at the federal level that you all can speak to ensure that smaller and even mid-sized, community-based nonprofits and those that are led by, people of color, Black and brown people, aren't left out of the federal funding opportunities during these, policy conversations?
Let Elizabeth start the answer.
So I think, one of the really important things that, for example, the bipartisan infrastructure law, but many different laws that contain funding opportunities, those pieces of legislation included technical assistance to support all different types of communities that maybe weren't traditionally served by federal funding sources, but should be, small, rural, disadvantaged communities. And as far as I know, that technical assistance funding is still available and something that, I strongly recommend folks look at if they need help accessing some of those various funding sources. I do think that some of the executive orders that the administration has recently issued, that have to do with immigration, that have to do with DEI, that have to, do with who should have access to funding based on whether or not they support this administration's positions on various policies. I do think that's troubling, and I do think it's going to make it harder for everyone. And, we're going to just keep using our elbows one foot in front of the other, trying to identify opportunities, trying to connect dots. But it is a challenging landscape, for lack of a better way to describe it.
David or Jordan, did you all have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I do not.
Okay. Okay. And so with that, Elizabeth, thank you for sharing that. And you talked a little bit about the recent executive orders. You talked about around immigration. I know we've seen quite a few around DEI, and there have been significant rollbacks where the nonprofit community we've been, running around trying to address, our missions and visions, right? Our mission and vision statements, because for so many of us, we are in a majority melanated community. And so the very communities that we serve are, written into these executive orders around DEI that we see all these, potential rollbacks for. So, what recommendations do you all have? I know you're saying that the landscape looks troubling, but what recommendations do you have to nonprofits in terms of how they're navigating the loss of, federal partnerships, especially if people are doing work around DEI? And I know that we hear that term, but we know that that is a very loaded term that includes, anything that relates to, Black community, Latino community, so forth and so on, brown communities. What is it that you all recommend? How do nonprofits navigate in this time, related to the loss of funding sources or the potential loss of funding sources?
Well, I'll just chime in on the front end and then turn it over to my colleagues. I mean, one thing that we've been telling people, and I know it seems small, but it is a really difficult time, is that if you have partners, if you have nonprofit partners that you work with, or that maybe through different associations who are in Republican districts and Republican states, the more those groups can coalesce and make sure that those members who frankly have the majority in a unified Republican government across the board, understand that we're not just talking about people's jobs when we're talking about federal employees. We're talking about lost services. We're talking about lost partnerships, lost opportunities, lost leveraging. I think another big thing that can be highlighted, particularly in partnership with those nonprofit partners in those other states and districts, is the leveraging. So we're not just talking about the federal government doling out dollars to nonprofits. Those dollars are often matched. I mean, you guys are doing your own fundraising. It's not 100% reliant on federal funding. And so when you're talking about, partnerships and leveraging and what it means beyond simply the federal dollars that aren't flowing any longer, I think, those members that represent those Republican states really need to understand who this is impacting, and they need to hear from those people. That's a very grassroots answer to your question, but I just kind of think like that's where we are in this current climate.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
So I also add, as it relates to just education, communication, not so much like delivering a product or delivering relief that is grounded in your budget, kind of facilitating that relief source. For nonprofits that are delivering education, and especially around like the rights, your rights and information you should know related to maybe free services around healthcare or X, Y, and Z. What we have been doing on the state side is convening folks who are sharing their communications apparatuses, right? Right now, there is an opportunity for nonprofits to work together to share information related to the education of what people should just know, right? Know in their communities, know where to go to get relief where there still is service delivery. And so, as much as you all can work together strategically to figure out where you have a shared mission and where that shared mission should equal kind of shared communications, there should be a partnership forged to also communicate to the folks that you're trying to serve, especially when the services aren't dependent upon federal funds. Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful. Jordan, I see you looking like you're ready to chime in.
No, no, my colleagues covered it well.
All right. Okay. I know, Elizabeth, you had mentioned when we were talking about the executive orders, you also had mentioned executive orders around immigration. So I wanted to talk and find out a little bit more about the recent changes in federal immigration policy and how it's affecting Maryland-based nonprofits that are serving immigrant and refugee communities.
I'll actually chime in here and just start by saying like this is a time that really is scary, right? And people are like operating and living in fear. And so I think the most practical thing that we have instructed nonprofits to do who are working in the immigrant community space is to make sure that the folks in your community are prepared to be able to connect with your congressional delegation offices. So practically, uh, on our site and on Chris Van Hollen's site, there is a privacy release form that any and everyone needs to have and fill out in order to access the support services from congressional offices. What we have started to instruct nonprofits to do is to, and I'll get this link to folks, is to print PDF copies of the privacy release form for interactions with ICE. And if there are people in your community that really feel like they are, days or weeks away from a situation where they could be detained, to pre-fill out that form and keep it with them. Because if they are detained, ICE has to allow them to give that form to a congressional staff representative. The problem that we're having now is people are detained and ICE, in some cases, aren't letting the congressional staff get release forms to them. So this way we're being proactive and making sure that form is already like on their person and they can get that to us, which allows us to then access like all the capabilities of our constituent service offices, and to work in tandem with the appropriate federal agencies to address their cases. So that's very practically what we want people here to take away. We will get you the PDF form, Tiffany, to circulate to folks on this call who work in the immigrant community space.
Absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead, Jordan.
Say I just dropped the link in the chat for everyone too.
Perfect. Okay, so the link has been dropped in the chat for the privacy release form. So
Yeah.
one that's on, and I would even encourage people, even if you're not doing work every single day with people in, immigrant and refugee communities, still make sure that you have this form, because as we speak back to how we collaborate and connect with one another, oftentimes we interact with each other in different spaces and places. So please make sure that you have that form and you're printing it off and you're getting it out into community, into the hands of people, and understanding that they should pre-fill it out in advance so that if they do run into a situation, it's easier to then get that document back to our congressional representatives. So thank you for that.
And Tiffany, to also just be very clear, and we'll put this in the instructions, they should fill out everything except for the date, because if they fill out the date, it triggers a time frame by which that form can be used. So it's everything but the date. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And Tiffany, are you able to see the link? I see a comment in the chat saying there or not.
You know what, I do see the link. It's not, I'm unable to access it, but what I will make sure is that we email the link out directly. So everybody that's on this call, we will make sure that we email you that link directly after this conversation in 30 minutes. So thank
Plus,
you.
and we'll get you an attachment to the actual PDF form itself, so you
Okay.
have that as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So with that, speaking about, immigration, the world is watching, right? The world is watching internationally. The Abrego Garcia case, people are looking at this all over the world. They've looked at this, they're watching it. And so, but this is unfolding in our backyard. This is started right here in Prince George's County. What updates do you all have on the case, and what precedent can you speak to that's literally being set for our immigrant communities?
Well, not being a lawyer, I won't speak to precedent. Maybe Elizabeth might want to chime in after I'm done. Maybe she won't. But I'll say that like the status of Mr. Garcia, he's still currently being held in Nashville. He's waiting to be arraigned on the charges the federal government wants to bring against him. His lawsuit against the federal government is still in play. It's a lawsuit that addresses the lack of due process that was afforded to him, or not afforded to him, in the unlawful deportation. Uh, there is a bail hearing that is expected for him and his attorneys either tomorrow, we've learned, or through next week. So sometime between tomorrow and the end of next week, there is expected to be a bail hearing, in which, it's our hope that he'll be able to post bail and come back to Maryland while they await the dates of the trial in Nashville. So that's what we know right now. And as more develops, Tiffany will share it with you. We're collaborating with, all our offices are kind of paying attention and sharing information. So I'll be sure to like bundle that up and get it to you for this group. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. As I kind of shift gears here, and before shifting gears, I want to again say thank you for this work that you all are doing, and I can't say thank you enough for this conversation, because right now people don't know where we're getting the answers from, right? We're looking in all of these different sources and information is conflicting, and so I appreciate you all getting us, this type of information, these answers, and while it just leaves us with a lot more hope and direction in terms of what to do and kind of next steps. And I just know that the communities that are serving our immigrant communities, and our Black and brown communities in general have just really been under siege, and so we're no longer in a threatening environment. We are as you stated, under siege. And so I think that us coming together is going to be critical as we move forward to try to navigate these times, and get through on the other end. So just kind of shifting gears, I want to talk about what are the most immediate federal policy changes that your office sees right now that are, impacting Maryland's nonprofit sector, especially those that are going to impact our small and mid-sized community-based organizations. And let me say this. Our membership ranges, from small to medium to large. We have some large organizations, but the reason you will hear me continuously mention small to mid-sized organizations is because oftentimes there's limited capacity within those organizations to follow policy, or they may not have a policy division or a policy person, and they're typically very grassroots and on the ground doing work consistently. And so sometimes the information doesn't get to our small and mid-sized organizations as quickly as they may with our larger organizations that typically are more resourced and have divisions that specifically focus on this. So I don't want there to be this assumption that I'm not advocating for our larger organizations. I am. I just know that the information is typically more relevant for some of our smaller to mid-sized orgs. So what are you all seeing in terms of the immediate policy changes that are impacting Maryland's nonprofit sector?
So I think that right now it's really the executive orders. I mean, to actually legislate and get things signed into law is a lengthy process. It's not even been 6 months really since this administration came in. And so they have been doing a lot of policy changes by these executive orders, not even just executive orders. There's guidance that agencies can use that is different than executive orders. And so those are some of the things we've talked about that are really affecting nonprofits and all types of organizations. I think also just the drastic reduction in the size of the federal government. So these RIFs, it's not just grants, right? Like federal agencies partner with groups in any number of ways. And I know a lot of people have staff, career staff that have served faithfully in Republican and Democratic administrations that they've worked with for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of those people are now being fired. So these things are all really having drastic implications for nonprofits, for hospitals, for schools, for lots of different folks that we work with. And it's we're continuing to raise our voice and talk about what it means to people. It's not just, like I said earlier, about somebody losing their job. It's about the services that that person provided to so many people, the partnerships. And, the more we talk about the negative implications, the more we just have to hope that it's not falling upon deaf ears. And that the same, frankly, is true in every state, whether it's a state like ours that is pretty blue or a red state. There are groups that are being impacted everywhere.
Thank you. So, we know that there was a rollback where the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, um, what do you all recommend? Like, how can nonprofits maintain communication and collaboration with the federal government or the White House, or is that even an option at this time? What does that look like for us with that particular rollback?
Partnership would mean you have a willing partner, right? Right. That would be the principle. And in this case, for people who are doing the service work that you all are doing, we don't have a genuine partner right now in the White House, which is why you saw the rollback of the office. So what can you do, right? I think to Elizabeth's earlier point, um, you all have platforms that already reach a lot of people who are paying attention because they are either vulnerable or they're serving a vulnerable population. And so the opportunity to coordinate, whether it's traditional or on social media, like to continue to tell the stories of the people who are being impacted or whose services are being impacted is really important. I cannot understate enough how important it is for leaders like yourselves to, in an innovative way or just in a traditional way, come together and join forces to tell these mass stories, right? Which will get the attention of lawmakers who want to turn away and will put the White House like in the light that it needs to be put in terms of rolling back these kinds of partnerships that traditionally work. The other thing here is there are people who have been affected by the federal government's actions, and people who want to put their resources into the community, a community of nonprofits. So the more we're communicating about the work that needs to continue to do, the more it's going to attract the resources that still exist in pockets, of our state and of our country. So it's about us really like kind of taking it upon ourselves to organize at a grassroots level to amplify the work that you're still trying to do and to attract the resources that are out there, just not coming from the federal government right now, right? But also to maintain focus on the cause, to push the federal government to do what it's supposed to do in serving the public.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Um,
Mhm.
and I know that you all at the federal level, right? But I want to transition a little bit and talk about the local level. And so, um, we are actually, we're talking about federal policy, but we're also seeing some trends that are a little troubling locally. And so I'm not sure if you've been able to follow what's happened recently, where we've had the recension of local funds from nonprofit organizations in the midst of a fiscal year. And so, given that some of these organizations do rely on federal dollars or partnerships, what can the Senate do to help protect or reinforce the role of nonprofits when nonprofits are also facing some local pushback and defunding efforts? What are your thoughts around that?
I'll speak for all of us so we can stay in a compliant place that doesn't get anybody into any trouble, all right? Because our colleagues at the local government are going to do the best they can with how they see the situation and their governing responsibility, right? And so we all want Prince George's County to succeed, right? But the context here is that we have a state like that is dealing with a major, structural deficit, right? And that has trickled down, right, and put pressure on county governments to fund vital programming. And budgets are a reflection of priorities and your values, and you have to prioritize where to put your dollars. But you got to put them in the community, right? So to kind of like where the Senate, where we are concerned, is we want to be partners with the nonprofit community and elevating and convening groups like this, so we can talk about how to influence the right kinds of investment, at every level of government, whether it's state, local, and municipal. But I will take the liberty in saying this as someone who just came from a county government context under County Executive Alsobrooks, right? It is very important to understand as nonprofits the power that you have to shape policy, right? You are individual organizations, many, and you all have individual priorities. But when there is a conversation with either a county council or a county-led government, or county government, right, led by, an executive and a council, it is your responsibility to know when you have to come together and collectively ask for there to be a rational conversation around balanced investments. You all have the power to do that. You just have to come together and plan out the conversation, and you'll get the result that you desire. But it only will happen if you all collectively, like, rationally think through the plan for the county and present it in the way that you know how.
You about to make me say we're in church, and I'm about to
Yeah.
say preach. So I'm
And
gonna.
I'll stop there, right? Because we work for Senator Angela Alsobrooks, and we are dedicated to convening, the good people who do good work in this county to affect um, good government. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. But I want to reiterate that we must come together. We need to speak collectively. And silence is not what we should be hearing at this moment. So, with that being said, are there any other tools that you can recommend at the federal level, like any technical assistance or any particular agency partnerships that you think could help to stabilize nonprofit organizations in the face of some of these unexpected local funding cuts that we've seen this year in the county?
I'm going to defer to Elizabeth. I know she talked a little bit earlier about some programming through legislation prior. I'll let her
Thank
expand.
you.
Sorry, say again what point you were referencing earlier, David. I just want to make sure I hit on what's of interest.
I think you had mentioned prior legislation that might have funded technical assistance
Yes,
programming.
yes. So it's not just yes. So it's the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's also, like, for example, water programs that have technical assistance elements. I wish that there was some sort of central location so that, folks could know like where you could go for technical assistance and that it would be more general versus tailored to specific programs, but that's just not quite the way it works. I think if you all had specific types of funding that you were interested in pursuing and you were interested in that sort of technical assistance element of it, folks could certainly reach out to me, follow up with me directly or with Jordan or David, and they'll loop me. And we have some different resources, whether it's the Research Service or the Congressional Affairs divisions at the different agencies where, we can try to help you figure out where that sort of technical assistance is available and for which types of funding.
Okay, okay. And are there any particular agencies that you think are more in alignment with working with nonprofits at this time, uh,
I
or
think it's more programs. I will say that I think, and I'm speaking a little out of school here because this is anecdotal, but I think that states and governments seem to be having a little bit of an easier time getting responses from federal partners. And so I know sometimes projects are joint between a government, a nonprofit, and the federal government. And so that may be kind of a backhanded way to get responsiveness would be, government to government.
okay, okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Because then we also have a number of municipalities here in the county as well that I think that it's important. And we've recently opened up to municipal membership to tie our municipalities into our nonprofit sector so that there could be greater collaboration. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. I think that there's maybe some opportunities there. So kind of, what are your thoughts in terms of how can our nonprofits stay really informed and engaged with the legislative updates that are coming out? Like, where are the best places to go, or what should we be doing to understand what's happening in real time in terms of how it's directly affecting nonprofit funding or opportunities, the windows that exist, operations, or even the constituents that we are serving? And I know that's very broad, there are different areas, but just trying to figure out where can we go to find out what's happening and get the information, because again, there's so much information out here and some of it is accurate information and some of it is not accurate. So just trying to get people on the right track to the correct sources.
I would say there really is not a central source of information. So I think that if you're interested in a specific federal agency or a specific topic area, staying tuned to that agency's website. And then I'm trying to think, I'm just trying to see if I can pull it up right now. So, I mean, grants.gov, I feel like is still, while it's not, I don't think the most user friendly opportunity. There is a lot of updating that happens on that site about eligibility, different things that are being posted, resources to help with grant writing. So I still think, that is probably a pretty good central source. And then, like I said, the individual agency websites that are of interest, because typically every federal program is housed within a specific federal agency. And so understanding kind of what that agency is doing, what they're focused on, and how maybe the grant for which you're interested in kind of fits into that bigger picture might be a helpful way to think about it.
Okay. Thank you for that, Elizabeth.
So I'll add, there is a convening of state directors every other week, and we actually talked about the information gap, not only for NGOs, but for other kind of leaders across different sectors. So we are discussing, how to pull together what we're learning in real time and share. And so I will make the commitment that as soon as we figure out what that cadence will be, um, our next call is on Tuesday. We'll discuss this more. And as it pertains to nonprofit, anything that's relevant for broadly, we can make sure we get that out to you in real time. At a minimum, when we address you every quarter, we will share what we have that's relevant. But that is an ongoing conversation, and it like this is all helping us also figure out where these gaps have been naturally or traditionally, and how we should close them.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay.
So, kind of, in wrapping up, what just want to know what opportunities or are there any opportunities that exist for nonprofits to be able to provide feedback and or even testimony on federal policies that directly impact their work or the communities that they're serving? Are there any opportunities that exist?
I'll chime in with just one opportunity. So, the senator I mentioned on the front end sits on the banking committee, the help committee, the EPW committee, and the aging committee. And anytime we have hearings on various topics, like if any of those hearing topics directly affect your organizations, or if there's a nominee that has been nominated to run an office that is particularly relevant to your nonprofit, we have the opportunity as a member of the committee to submit materials for the record. So, letters, testimonies, news articles, really, you can submit anything. We also have opportunities to submit testimony into the congressional record, or not so much testimony, but just statements into the congressional record. I think that's probably less effective than use of the committee process. But those are at least two opportunities that we have. And I think, even Senator Alsobrooks has taken things that she's heard from folks on the ground in Maryland, and she's actually delivered questions, asked witnesses, hey, this is what's happening on the ground in my state because you've eliminated X program or you've fired this many workers in that office. So yeah, we will absolutely take any information that you think is relevant with respect to shaping policy. And I echo what David said about your voices being powerful in shaping policy, and we certainly have those opportunities to put your statements and your information into the record.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. I did have a question for you. What does EPW stand for? I know you
Oh,
said bank.
sorry, yeah, and that's the Environment and Public Works Committee.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. We have so many acronyms, and sometimes the same acronym can stand for like 5 different things. So,
I try not to use acronyms, but I worked on the EPW committee for 8 years before I came to this office. And so that one is hard to shake, that acronym.
oh, thank you for clarification. Appreciate that. So, is there anything else that, for each of you that you think that our nonprofit sector should be aware of or paying close attention to, right now at the federal level? Like, what should we keep our eye on? What should we be thinking about as we, plan? I know, David, you started while we talked about how, we've been focused so much on, really being more reactionary. And now, we're moving into a space where there's a greater opportunity for us to be more responsive and intentional. So what are the things that we should be keeping our eye on as a nonprofit community that range in terms of the services that we provide
I think
in the
everyone's got to continue to keep their eye on the budget process. I think that's just a simple answer, right? Um, and I think naturally the nonprofit community is already tuned into the traditional funding sources that have supported it in the past. If you're coming from the perspective of a specific nonprofit executive director or finance director, like you all know where to go, you know where you're looking for traditional grant funds. I have to remind you about that, but paying attention to the budget process is really important. Also, as we prepare for the CDS, processes going into 2020 calendar year 2026, it's really important, right? What sets applications above others is that there is a coalition of funding. There are multiple funding sources for your projects. So as much as you can diversify where the funding sources are coming from, and makes your application more competitive across the board in any congressional delegation or context. Elizabeth, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good feedback.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So following the budget process and then making sure that we have, stronger applications for the CDS process and looking for other ways to diversify those funds because that makes it stronger. So I just wanted to make sure that our nonprofits are hearing directly from you in real time what the need is, what you all are looking for, and what makes a strong application and what we should be paying attention to. I did want to mention Sasha Bruce, Debbie Shore from Sasha Bruce mentioned that she appreciates Senator Alsobrooks helping to introduce the Homeless Children and Youth Act. And so, so I wanted to highlight that was placed in the chat. And I wanted to give you all an opportunity to kind of share any closing remarks, any closing thoughts that you all have before I close out. And while you all are thinking about any of your closing remarks, I would share with our audience, all the people who are attending, if you have any additional questions, you can put them in the chat. We will take them and we will send them directly to Senator Alsobrooks' office. We will get answers for them, and then we will provide those answers. We'll put them on our website and send you the link to it so that you can, if there's anything in particular that you have a question regarding at the federal level, we can get you that type of response. So please take a moment to do that. And so while that is taking place, I wanted to, again, give Senator Alsobrooks's team an opportunity to provide any closing remarks. But I also want to, as you're getting ready to do that, I want to just say thank you for taking the time on this Juneteenth to talk to our nonprofit community. And, more than that, I think that this day is very unique in the sense that, what Juneteenth represents. And I earlier sent out a video message talking about, what Juneteenth really means, and that instead of just us focusing on the celebration component, really looking at it being a moment for remembrance and reflection, and understanding how our voices are very important and not being silent in the face of adversity or oppression. And so, whether that's at the federal level or the local level, and everywhere in between, we need to really come together and think about what this day means. And we need to be able to move in that reflective moment and move together collectively. So, David, I want to give it to you and your team to kind of, are there any other things that you want to close us out with? Anything that you want to share?
Jordan, Elizabeth, you guys will go, and then I'll close out. It's like, if you guys have
I'll
any
jump
thoughts?
in. Thank you for that comment about our homelessness bill. I think that's one way in which we can remain hopeful and forward looking. I hate kind of coming into these conversations and feeling like we're the
Yeah.
bearer of bad news about the current state of affairs. But we were all around before Donald Trump was the president. We're going to be around after he's the president, I hope. And so thinking about some of those big ideas to shape policy. So the homelessness bill is just one thing that we're working on, bipartisan legislation. We hope that the ultimate end game there is going to not only be a unified definition, but also more resources to support the expanded definition. The same is true in so many different issue areas. So I would encourage all of you to bring us your policy ideas, new programs, new ideas, things about the federal government that aren't working that maybe we could consider fixing, because those efforts will outlive the current administration and dynamic.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I would just add, when it comes to the process for anyone that's looking to apply for next year, like I said, beginning of this year, working with Chris Van Hollen's office with Deborah Haney, who did an awesome job leading the process. Feel free to reach out. I dropped our email, all of our emails in the chat for everyone. If you feel like there's something missing, believe me, we have a whole outline, and we do not mind meeting with CEOs and their team one-on-one to show you how the application should look and how it could be helpful by adding certain things that you might feel like you're missing. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you.
And finally, I will thank Tiffany and Brianna and everyone at Nonprofit Prince George's. Thank you all for creating this space to have a real conversation about what we're really seeing. And we are going to be a reoccurring partner in these conversations because we are here and this is what we're supposed to do, plus everything that we're supposed to do with you. I would also just add that I think it's also important to kind of tell or end with the human story of where we are. I want everyone to also just hear me when I say, the senator has been senator for just over 6 months. For the first 3 months on the state team, it was just Jordan and I running around the entire state. And we've got we've been able to like expand her staff in the state to look more like, an actual office of people and not, an ongoing fire drill. And for Elizabeth's part in this, right, she is a wonderful legislative director who has had to oversee 2 quarters of work that normally you'd see in 2 years in a congressional office. And she's still not in a place where her department is fully staffed because it's just normal not to be there in 6 months for anybody's office. And so, like Senator Alsobrooks says, we've all made the commitment to maximize all the energy that we have and the limited capacity that we still have to make sure we're partnering in real time with all of you who are experiencing the same kind of pressure and capacity in the work that you're doing. And so we all kind of approach this work um, knowing that we have to give more of ourselves every day to get as much done as we possibly can. And there is no excuse that we've been there for 6 months, but we're still opening offices and still hiring staff and trying to like operate an office that's worthy of the people of Maryland and the people of Prince George's County that largely sent the senator to serve. So we just continue to thank you for your grace in the context that we are trying to work in, making no excuses. We will continue to deliver the best of our capacity and ability to meet the chaotic moment that we're all in. And we will be here longer than Donald Trump will be here, and we will be okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Please take the rest of this Juneteenth to think about what's next. Like, this is a conversation that should lead us to continue to move, and there should be action behind it, right? It was not just a conversation for us to hear. And so I know that everyone that joined, most of the names and people I know and we work with in some capacity. So let's continue this conversation. Let's figure out how we lift our voices and not remain silent. So thank you and have a blessed evening. Thank you so much.